Hey, Rabbi Saroken, how are you?
I love your hat.
Thank you. Yeah, I just found it just sort of in the prop closet because in the studio here we have a prop closet, of course.
By the way, it looks good.
Yeah, I do okay with hats. I have a pretty extensive hat collection, actually.
I'm trying to think if I knew that.
Don't get a chance to wear them too often, but I do have
4th of July, you sometimes wear
Yep,
like
for seersucker Shabbat.
seersucker hat.
So good. I missed the day as you were pointing out to me earlier that in the technical categorization of my my age grouping, I'm a boomer.
You are.
Boomer.
You are.
So
Boomers can wear hats.
There was a time when people wore hats. I mean, it was part of your wardrobe.
Speaking of which, this Shabbos was Pimlico racetrack, the big Preakness. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I was talking to Yitzi Schleifer. Shout out to Yitzi. Did you go, Jer?
There.
Oh, that's so nice. I really want to go, but it's always on Saturday. But on Friday, they have that special Friday Black-Eyed Susan Day. And as it turns out, I've been here 17 years. I've never had the experience of doing that. And I really want to go next year.
Go next year.
I know. Because you know what?
Chance.
Remember, I don't know if it hasn't happened that much to me anymore, but when we used to write eulogies, a lot of times they would talk about how central, the racetrack was, as like a meeting place, as a recreational place.
For sure.
So I want to go experience it.
Yeah, for sure.
I know a guy.
Is his name John Davison? No. Okay, good.
That was the track and horse racing, big part of Baltimore culture.
Yeah.
For sure.
So
Sure.
maybe we need to experience that.
We could do Minion
Oh.
Friday night at the Preakness. But although next year it's going to be in Laurel, is what
Next year, Laurel, then
so
Wait, why?
because they're taking the track down as part of a
Oh.
kind of a re-urbanization planning project.
Well, nice.
Come to Laurel.
Yeah.
40 minutes.
No, I really wanted
Is
to
Laurel
go to. I
40
really
is it 40
wanted to
minutes?
go to
Well,
Pimlico.
Come to
if
All right,
we
listen.
make it, I'll
Yeah.
wear this hat.
Okay,
Or,
Game on.
Or some
game on.
such hat. We also wanted to just shout out to Sisterhood.
Woohoo.
Because today we taped this. We taped the Parshat Behar Torah discussion thingamajigger early.
Yeah.
So today happens to be Monday. When do folks see it? Thursday. Thursday. Folks will see it Thursday. But the Sisterhood had its annual meeting. Unfortunately, I was not able to be there because I had a funeral. But Sisterhood is really remarkable. Sisterhood is just remarkable. Bethel Sisterhood.
I actually think that they are for sure extraordinary. I actually think that we have not only the best, but the biggest
I think so too.
sisterhood in the country, which maybe means in the world.
Yeah. No.
I mean it. I mean, that
absolutely.
seems hyperbolic, but I think that that's true.
Absolutely. It's really.
It's over 420 women are a part of our sisterhood.
Yeah, it's remarkable. It's remarkable organization, and they do such wonderful work for the
Mhm.
congregation and creating community. It's just,
Yeah.
and
So,
in part,
yeah.
because of the generosity of Sisterhood, we're able to have this nice studio, and all the gadgets that Jeremy has in here and everything.
the hats.
So the hats.
Those are Cantor Kings.
That's actually not surprising. Cantor King also has a really nice hat collection.
He does. Although Cantor King also has connections with various and sundry professional costume shops in Baltimore. I've been to one with him a couple of times. That in and of itself is an experience. It's a lot of fun, actually. So what's the
Yeah.
what's the Sedra?
The Sedra, the portion this week is double. Actually, it's Behar-Bechukotai. And so Behar is really focusing on sort of this idea of needing to rest, right? So there's sort of this idea of both Shabbat as the time every 7 days that the Jewish people are instructed to rest or to restore their soul, really, the nafash. And then we have the Shemitah, which is our land takes a rest every 7th year. And then you have the Yovel or the Jubilee, which is that every, 49th or 50th year, the sort of land returns to its original owner, which is God. So I think there's a lot of interesting things to talk about in Behar, and then Bechukotai I actually think is like, as you and I look forward to sort of exploring these texts together. One of the interesting things is Bechukotai really talks a lot about, and if you don't follow my mitzvot, if you don't follow my instruction, there's going to be punishments. And we keep escalating the level of consequence or punishment, which, I mean, I was just looking really fast because I always sort of go like, wow, to this one. But basically, I mean, it goes to like, and if these things don't, change you and you still don't follow my rules or my mitzvot, and then listen to this. It's like, I find it so terrifying. I will send pestilence among you, and you shall be delivered into your enemy's hand. And then listen to this other. When I break your staff of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in a single oven. They will dole out your bread by weight, and though you will eat, you shall not be satisfied. Right. I feel like I live in that perpetual state of like being hungry. But then it gets even worse. Like if you still don't do it, and then it comes to like, you will eat the flesh of your children.
Right.
Like it's so terrifying that I feel like in some ways, it almost like can scare you into keeping mitzvot for sure.
Maybe that's the purpose of it, being in there. I mean, it's interesting, like with that material and some of the other material in these parshayot, there's, in my mind, this whole question of like, is this even meant to be taken literally or not? Theologically, I've rejected the whole reward and punishment idea. It seems to me clear that it just doesn't work that way. So now that being said, like the way I incorporate that into my life is to understand that there are consequences to my actions. But I don't believe that God is watching me, and if I do this or don't do that, that I'm going to get punished or rewarded. I mean, it just doesn't seem to me to work like that. But I think there are consequences to our actions.
It's interesting in the Talmud in Masechet Brachot. There's the ancient rabbis were really struggling with their understanding of reward and punishment, also in the consequences. And they were really like sort of throughout the beginning of that, sugyo to the Masechet, the compendium. I don't know how to translate, but they say they're trying to figure out like how it can be that that good behavior is always rewarded and bad behavior is always punished, because we see in the world a lot of bad people that seem to be thriving and a lot of good people that seem to be suffering. And they end up saying like, it might not happen here in this world. So, but in the world to come, right? Like in this like bigger story of a soul's life, that ultimately there are consequences for our actions. And I do hold on to that. I think you and I talked like a long time ago. This is probably, I don't want to say too particular the year, but it was a long time ago, and you and I were talking about someone who just like didn't have a good life, just success, didn't really have professional success, and didn't really find this person didn't really find this person's way, and didn't have relationships, like all of the things that you would want to sort of make up what we think of as a good life. And had a very, 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 very small funeral. I think there were like 3 people. And then I remember you and I talking about like really holding on to this hope that there would be good things in store for him.
Yeah.
That like, and I think that sort of rests upon this foundation that this world isn't the end. And, we can't really see all the rewards being given for the good and the punishments for the bad. But like, I do think that you have to believe, whether you do as you're saying, which is that like, there are always consequences. It's just a question of what we see and when those consequences come.
Yeah. So again, to me, like, in the sense of sort of my theological journey, which is a classic rabbinic idea for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, that was sort of their kind of magic key to unlock that theological conundrum, which is to say, oh no, it's not this. It's really talking
Right.
about the world to come. It's not a place I want to put. It's not a basket I want to put my eggs in, really. But I do, like, again, like, there's a sense that my actions make a difference, and it's not that God cares, or not. I don't know, but it doesn't seem that way to me. But it's that my actions make a difference, so I might as well act in the best way.
Yeah.
In the best way I can.
It's an interesting idea too, because in many ways I feel like people are very comfortable and eager to subscribe to a God who's very loving and compassionate and forgiving and understanding and all those things we say when we say, like, Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, sort of when we remind God of all of those, like, loving, lovely attributes of God's self.
Right.
But we also see within the Torah, and I think we come back to this, every once in a while, but a God that's also, like, demanding and gets angry and, causes plagues and, is an interesting thing. But when in one of my Torah classes, there's a person who's really just, like, incredibly smart, and, she has really been struggling as she rereads Torah with with an adult mind,
Right.
With some of God's actions, because we really do, I think, in many ways, like to think of God in all of those really loving ways, and then all of a sudden you're like, yikes.
Well, that's not the God of the Torah for sure.
Yeah.
That love, that, like, sort of warm and fuzzy, is the term. That's not God of the Torah for sure.
The Siddur gives us more of that God, right? Like Ahava Rabbah, like
a little bit. I mean, Ahava Rabbah, I understand as being, it's not God saying God loves me or you or Jeremy. I mean, Jeremy, of course, but it's God saying God loves the Jewish people. Like, it's a statement about Am Yisrael.
But as a part of the Jewish people, right?
So it's like that old Woody Allen line, like, I would never be a member of a club that would accept me, right? And it's like that, like, despite Schwartz, okay, it's but another thing along those same lines, like literal, not literal, is the whole system of the Jubilee year, right?
Yeah, fascinating.
So one thing about that is that it is in years a reproduction of the structure in days that you have with the counting of the Omer.
Yes.
Right. So our Omer, we're in the Sphira period right now, getting
Day
close to the end,
36.
right? And so we're counting the 7 times 7 days, and and then the Jubilee is that in years, so it's 7 times 7 years, and then you get to the Jubilee year. The problem is what you said before, like this whole idea, which is expressed in the Torah. I mean, it says specifically, like, debts are canceled, land is returned to original owners, and all this stuff. And the question is, and already, the early commentators are wrestling, like, how could that be?
How does that really work?
How would it actually work?
Actually, I bumped into someone. This is so crazy. I didn't even tell you this, but on this cottage journey that I've been on, there have been times where, like, I was in New York a couple of times for conferences, and so I went to Lincoln Square. Then when I was in Jerusalem this summer at Ian Pear's synagogue at Shir Hadash, I bumped into the same lady from Lincoln Square and whatever. She was there settling, like, some issues because they had bought a home in Jerusalem, and as it turns out, like, much of the land, like, it's a challenging thing to own land there. And actually the church owns a lot of land. Yeah. And so, like, it was very complicated. So she was there working with lawyers to try to work through this real estate issue because of this.
Yeah.
That question of, like, who owns property. And I love the idea that within Judaism, like, nothing is really mine. Like, right. Like, you could say something is, like, of me or to me, but nothing is mine.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways, like that does show a really beautiful way of saying like everything's on loan to us from God or a gift to us from God.
Right. Even our bodies, actually. I
Yeah.
think the tradition would suggest.
Which is why we don't do cremation or other things.
All those kinds of things. Right. Yeah. No. I think that I agree with that. I think that's and so that actually gets to the like. So how? Let's say it was not real. Like it was. Let's say it was just impractical to the point. In other words, how could you have a system where everyone knows the 50th year is coming up? Then why would people lend anyone money knowing in 2 years the debt's going to be canceled?
Yep.
Or why would anyone sell property knowing that they're going to get the property, have to give it back? Like all this kind of stuff. And so the question then is, okay, if it's not actual, what is the message of it? You know, what is the Torah of it, if you will? And so to me, that's always been about the idea. I always feel like, you know, the Torah has, like, on the one hand, this ideal vision that it's laying out for us. And on the other hand, there's all these like technical things that does it work? Does it not work? No, but maybe it's about it's about expressing the ideal vision. So with the Jubilee year, the ideal vision to me that's being expressed is this sense that in places where there's a danger of a growing wealth gap, right?
It's interesting.
Because if you get into debt, that spirals downward. Still to this day, if you lose your property, how do you recover from like those kinds of things?
It's interesting.
And the Torah doesn't want that kind of society. And so the Torah lays out the Jubilee as an ideal. Like you have to strive for a society where, you know, people have an opportunity to get back on a level playing field.
I love that. It's beautiful.
That's the way I've always understood
it's
it.
Beautiful.
You
know, it's also interesting, you know, both a Shabbat and also a Shemitah, right? So we're going to have a Shemitah year in a few years from now, and that's the Shemitah year is when we let the land lie, you know, and we don't take from the land, and we recognize that everything, including land, needs an opportunity to rest. I think, you know, when you're in Israel, you can really deeply feel the impact of a Shemitah year a little bit differently than we can. But it's an interesting thing, I think, you know, even just thinking about our world today and how we're doing in the realm of giving ourselves the opportunity to rest.
Not well, I would say, actually.
And did COVID, like, can we still feel the impact of COVID? Like, did that slow us down? Did that help us sort of recenter?
Yeah. I think that's such a great question to ponder. I think that I've been thinking recently, actually, that COVID is starting to be a little bit like 9/11. You know, and that there was this massive shift in terms of how people were thinking and feeling and connecting to one another. You know, understanding their lives and what was important and prioritizing things. And after 9/11, and then time goes by, and like you're back in the grind, you know. And I think a little bit that's happening with COVID at this point. You're just kind of like back in the grind. Everything's coming up. You're running on the wheel, like all that kind of stuff. What's your take on it?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I feel like I've been having that conversation a little bit with people about their workplaces, right? Yeah. I feel like there's, I think, a different flexibility post September 11th, and I'm sorry, post pandemic. Where Jeremy's giving us 2 minutes, where people, I think, have more flexibility in terms of space. You know, I think there's a little more understanding that like you can actually do work from from non-office spaces.
Right.
But I do think that people are also being told like time to come back to the office because at the end of the day, a lot for many professions, a lot of good things can happen when you're crossing paths and you're in the office.
Right, for sure. Exactly.
But I don't know. I think in some ways you and I like started talking about the generations earlier, which is when I told you were a boomer. But I'm
proud of that.
I know. You should be.
What is Jeremy?
Jeremy's a millennial. but he acts like a Gen Xer.
For that.
Yeah, you act like a Gen
Whatever's
X.
before
You You act like you're in my gen, like a Gen Xer.
70.
You don't act like a 75-year-old.
I was going to say,
I eat dinner at
that is.
I was going to say
75.
70. But
But I do think that there is, and Jared, I'm like super curious for you to jump in on this too, that I do think that there is sort of a generational divide or a shift that is probably more, I don't know, it probably factors in even more than the pandemic.
yeah, I think so too.
You know?
No doubt. I mean, for sure, young people, there's a whole, I don't know what the proper designation is, but like my kids, and even kids, not kid, but young people up into their 30s want to be able to have at least some flexibility around that.
I think that's true.
When it's interesting because we live across from Under Armour, the Under Armour World Headquarters, and they're on a 3-day-a-week in the office program.
Yeah.
So, and I actually ran into a member of ours who works for Under Armour, Dan Zuskin, who was Jerry Zuskin's grandson. And I was trying to figure out the pattern, and basically he said they have to be in the office 3 days. Most people choose to do it so that they're in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That way you don't have to go in the office Friday or Monday. So basically kind of 4-day weekends where you don't have to show up into the office.
But then we get into the next question, though. If you are manipulating your work schedule to be home on that Monday and Friday, does that play into the argument about it not being productive to be at home? And I think a lot of it has to do with what type of job you have also.
I agree.
What type of work ethic you have. I could work from home every day.
And still get your job done.
And get the job I have at Bethel, I could probably do 50% of my job. But we do have individuals. There's someone that works on my team that's at home 3 days a week and could probably work at home 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But I think it's type of job and it's work ethic also.
Yeah.
That goes into that.
Yeah.
If you're a person that needs
true.
to be managed, if you're a person that can't stay on task, working from home might not be for you.
Yeah.
I was going to say I can get just as little done at home as I can in the office. Like it doesn't completely. But
since you threw me the mic, I'm giving you the 1 minute warning
all right.
for the people.
1 minute.
1 minute. 1 minute.
All right. Something special about Behar-Bechukotai.
Well, one thing that strikes me is Behar. They're still at Sinai. Like I think it's so easy to lose track of that here we are, because in your mind, like it's Exodus 20 and the 10 Commandments, and then they're on their way. No, here's the end of Leviticus. It's a whole nother book, and they're still at Sinai.
Yeah.
They haven't moved. Yeah, it's interesting to me.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think for me this parsha probably speaks to me as like just a reminder that that rest is good. Yeah, I think especially when you have work to do, whether that's like professional work like we do, or consuming caregiving or anything else, that sometimes you just get so used to being so busy that it's actually can be really hard to rest. I don't know if you find that, but it's hard to go from 130 miles an hour to 35 miles an hour. It's
for sure.
It takes a while to make that adjustment, and I feel like I'm not very good at it because a lot of times I feel like we're mostly 6 or 7 days a week in overdrive.
Well, that's the other, right. For us, an additional challenge is that, so you could say, the classic Jewish answer to that problem, which I think is a huge problem today, is Shabbat.
Yeah.
But talk on Shabbos also for us. So it's a challenge. Gail and I were talking about this the other day, maybe yesterday even, where the pace can get so frenetic that you realize you really haven't had time to do anything.
No.
It's not about doing something. It's about not doing something, which gives you time to actually think and pause and reflect and do all those kinds of things, which it's so hard to find the time. It's just really...
Yeah. And in that time, I was reading a book by Juliet Funk, and it was called White Space or something like that. but it really talks about like that downtime being crucial or critical,
Yeah.
In terms of generating creativity in your brain. I remember, I don't know when it was, but there was a day that I had all day off. And I didn't even know, like maybe we're lucky if we work 7 days a week and have one night off
Right.
somewhere. You know what I mean? Like it's not, so just the rest, I think. I don't know how to construct our lives accordingly, but I think it reminds me, and that feels important.
Yeah. So, right. I mean, minimally, the tradition is suggesting to us, hey, you need to rest.
Even
Yeah. Like, you really do. It's important, It's the old saying, like, we're not human beings, we're human doings, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be more beings. All right, Rabbi, great to be with you, as always. Been a couple of weeks.
Oh, the hat comes out.
Just thanks to Jeremy behind the glass and everyone for tuning in and listening. Have a great Shabbos. Come on in. Let's see you in shul.